Hi everyone, I'm back again with another episode of Mull It Over, a Hearthstone review show where we break down key early game plays by the Grandmasters, starting from the Mulligan. In case anyone missed week 3 of GM, we had a one-time unique format where players had to bring all 10 classes, and then ban 6 from their opponents. In short, the good decks were ineligible and the off-meta decks got their day in the sun, most notably Paladin and Shaman. Now, both of these classes saw 2 archetypes be brought by many players. For Shaman, Totem and Evolved Galakrond, and for Paladin, Murloc and Highlander. What all 4 decks have in common is that they rely on their early minions to stick in order to get a big payoff, which is characteristic of aggro decks. So today's episode is all about how to approach early turns in aggro matchups. In case you're not familiar with the term, aggro is short for aggressive, and it basically means your deck runs mostly cheap, efficient minions and tries to win the game fast. You sacrifice a card-for-card value advantage in order to consistently establish early board dominance, and ideally, you end the game before your opponent can even play their strongest cards. Some other common characteristics of aggro decks are a lack of comeback mechanisms and inclusion of some form of burst damage. But of course, we're reviewing GM, so enough about the basics. There were tons of high-level plays made throughout matches this weekend, and I want to talk about 2 important concepts to remember when playing aggro matchups. The first one is preemptive minion damage. In Hearthstone, it's easy to miss the importance of damaging a minion that you can't immediately remove. Because your opponent can decide how the damaged minion trades on their turn, it often feels better to just direct your damage to the face. But making these types of trades in the early game can actually be crucial. Let's take a look at Bunny Hopper's Shaman versus Boston's Hunter here. On turn 2, Bunny trades his Blazing Battle Mage into the Dwarven Sharpshooter, leaving both minions at 1 health. He also has a Novice Engineer developed on board, so instead of going face, what this means is that the Sharpshooter is unable to get a clean 2 health minion kill with the Hunter hero power, and if it trades against anything left on board, it will also die off. Had Bunny gone face, Boston simply could have pinged the Battle Mage and then traded his Sharpshooter into the 1/1 and pulled ahead on board. This could have been punished by something like Desert Spear, coined out by Boston, but of course it's better to play around what you can see your opponent can do versus what might be in their hand. Later, Boston commits the extra hero power damage onto the Battle Mage anyway, and Bunny has board initiative on the following turn. In this other game, Nalgidon uses his Rocket Og Merchant to ping Monsanto's Sharpshooter down to 2 health, so that it also can't get a value trade on board. And he's later rewarded by Monsanto using his own minions and a Desert Spear charge to clear the board. The second concept is timing minion threats. Generally, aggro decks like to go first, so that they can be the first to develop onto the board, given that they run many 1-drops. But when you're going second as aggro, a common question is whether to use the coin immediately. On turn 1, should you coin out 2 1-drops, coin out a 2-drop, or save it altogether? This is on a case-to-case basis, of course, but generally you should make your board as hard to remove for the opponent as possible, while also considering your own follow-up turns. Let's look at how some GMs time their minion threats to get a better idea of that mindset. In Zoo versus Totem Shaman, Don takes a different approach by coining the Blazing Battle Mage he kept alongside a Guardian Og Merchant. He creates a sticky 2/1 and another 2/1 in response to Blitzchung's Battle Mage. And because most Totem Shamans are not running removal or buffs until turn 3, I can confidently say that this play won Don the game. Blitzchung could hardly come back from the spot because that's just the nature of Totem Shaman. As an aside, in episode 1 I said that Zoo is mostly looking for Scrap Imp and Hand of Gul'dan in the Mulligan, but keeping this hand here for Don makes a lot of sense in aggro mirrors, and you can see that Don's play is exactly why. Another example is in Bunny Hopper's Paladin game versus Swids' Galakrond Evolved Shaman. Bunny kept a Blazing Battle Mage in the opener, but he decides not to play it on turn 1, because it walks right into an Invocation of Frost, which would allow Squids a turn of efficient removal while also advancing his game plan of invoking Galakrond. Instead, Bunny chooses to play his Argent Squire that he drew, which trades much more favorably against a potential 2/1 from the invoke. In this game of Shaman versus Druid, just Saiyan's early game plan is clearly outlined right from the mulligan. He keeps 3 cards, probably planning to coin out Evil Totem plus Beaming Sidekick on turn 2. This puts the totem at 4 health, which is just above Bog Beam and Wrath range, kind of the sweet spot against Druid. From there, Saiyan would ideally play Totemic Reflection and just snowball his board. He even draws the Surging Tempest for a smooth curve on turn 1. However, Nalgidon correctly identifies the potential for disaster, so he does something unusual for Druids, playing Power of the Wild on turn 2 for a 3-2 Panther instead of a board buff. I think this was a game-winning play, because it forces Saiyan to respond to the 3-2 instead of develop an 0-4. Saiyan, of course, pivots, using his Reflection for just a +2/+2 buff. He eventually gets to stick his totem, but by then, Nalgidon has enough mana to play his Mount Seller for the win. This is a similar concept with what Glory did versus Dawn on turn 1, innervating Rising Winds not for draw but for a 3-2 versus Totem Shaman. He even casts a full cost Iron Bark on the Eagle so it can take a value trade with Dawn's Battle Mage, and Glory just never let go of the board from there. The concept extends to Druid versus, say, Highlander Hunter as well, as you can see Purple coining out Power of the Wild versus Monsanto. But later in the game, Monsanto himself displays some great aggro knowledge by playing Fairy Dragon on turn 3 instead of Primordial Explorer. Aggro decks are all about the efficiency, and playing cards on curve tends to be their most powerful play, but strong aggro players can identify when going off curve is correct, and I think this was a great display of threat timing by Monsanto. On 3 mana, Druids would generally like to play some type of removal spell, of which Wrath and Bog Beam line up perfectly against Explorer. But Fairy Dragon dodges those with its ability, and the timing is just 1 turn before a possible overgrowth for Purple. Purple happened to have the second Fungal Fortunes for something to do this turn, but in other situations I could very easily imagine Monsanto's off-curve play forcing Purple to pass his turn altogether. Similarly, I want to point out Glory's turn 4 as Murloc Paladin versus Kin's Resurrect Priest. Kin has just played Breath of the Infinite to put all of Glory's buffed Murlocs down to 1 health. Glory's on-curve play is Felfin Navigator, but he identifies that the +1 health buff from it would be completely irrelevant because Kin was telegraphing a second 2 damage AoE in hand. Instead, Glory plays War Leader and floats 1 mana, which gets in 6 more damage that turn compared to a potential Felfin. This extra push leaves Kin no time to safely execute his power plays, and Glory closes out the game by turn 7. So that's it for my aggro review, but I do have to talk about one more thing that doesn't really fit with the theme of this episode because Sottle straight up called me out on broadcast.
Anti-aggro stuff that you could be mulliganing for, found kind of interesting. Question for Gia to potentially answer on her hit show, Mull It Over, which you can find on our YouTube channel. Subscribe now.
In a Druid versus Highlander Hunter game, Bunny Hopper full keeps 2 Glowfly Swarms and a Fungal Fortune on the play. I'll keep this answer short and sweet. It's correct, because Bunny Hopper did it. For real though, I think this makes a lot of sense because the consecutive Glowfly board's game plan is quite strong against Hunter, which essentially only has Zephyrus for reliable mass removal. The Fungal Fortunes almost guarantees him a powerful Glowfly, and many chances to draw removal for Hunter early game. It's bold, but I like it. Oh, worth noting that before the Glowfly turn, Bunny Hopper preemptively damages a Bone Wraith with Bog Beam, which would mean it potentially trades with the Glowfly on the following turn. I guess this bit still fits with the theme of the video. As underrepresented as Paladin and Shaman normally are, ultimately I think this week proves that in the right hands the decks can still perform. But will I actually be playing them on ladder? That's a question I definitely have to mull over.